Hello, welcome to Conversations at the WholeNote. This is David Perlman, and my guest is Alex Pauk, who is conductor of Esprit Orchestra, founder of Esprit Orchestra, and its chief curator and lifesaver for 32 seasons at this point. And we're not going to talk about all 32 seasons,
but in general.
In general.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
Absolutely. So before we actually started this, we were just chatting about orchestra size, and you were saying that it's been as large as 87, but middle line would be about 65, 70 players, depending on repertoire.
60, 65, but sometimes we have 45, 50. It really depends on the repertoire. And so we sometimes are considered a chamber orchestra.
Right.
Not a small chamber orchestra, a large.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting because sometimes I do the large works with a reduced string section, but I have found it's actually very interesting if you have string players who really play well together, even if it's a smaller group, they can sound bigger than if you have a very large group that's playing not so well,
with less clarity to their tone.
So I'm able to have an economical large orchestra.
So of the core players, because I want to ask about what it takes to have the esprit de corps to actually be part of something like this. But who's been with you right from the get-go?
Oh, well, I would say there are about, about 30 players, or maybe a few less than that, who have been with us since maybe the second or third year. The first 2 years, there was quite a bit of turnover in the players. I mean, it was exploring what we were doing.
Right.
The first concert took place in Kingston and moved to Toronto. And, it took a couple of years to finally get settled in Toronto, first of all, which is our home base. And that's actually, it was in 1985, our third year, that we actually developed a board, et cetera, and became a formal organization. So the first 2 years, it was exploratory, seeing who, what, how, when, money or no, can it work?
Right.
And so, so the real core group has been maybe from second or third year.
Kingston.
Well,
why?
because I was at the time working with the National Youth Orchestra as an animateur, composer, conductor, stimulating stuff there.
Right.
And the first group was put together with some faculty, some people from Toronto, etc. It was a really mixed combination of people, so that's why the first concert was in Kingston, because that's where the NYO had its summer
base.
sessions.
I get it. So that's how it fitted. So you say there's 25, 30 players who get it.
But
so what is it that they just get?
I think that there's an understanding that we are always trying to put players, musicians, in a position where they can do well, and that there's really challenging music of a certain high quality. We attempt that, and we also attempt to offer the composers, when we commission them, a chance to write, knowing that they will have hopefully an unapologetic performance of their work, and that they can interact with the musicians without fear of being scorned. I mean, they can say what they feel and the musicians will respond. So there's a working atmosphere that is conducive to everybody being able to do well. And it's really interesting. I mean, I think that kind of the attitude and the feeling is that, yeah, this is a good place to stretch. I know that, especially in the early years, when there were not so many new music groups around Toronto as there are now, it was greatly valued, and also musicians who played in some of the other orchestras around town that I won't name said that it improved their ability to play in those other groups. Well, for example, the rhythmic complexities and challenges that occur in the music we play, when players were able to do that with great facility because of being with Esprit, when they went somewhere else, it was like easy.
Yeah.
Lesser complex things were a lot easier. And then when they were faced with new music, performances was not a problem for them.
Attitudinally either, I would expect.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Because,
And you know,
the mandatory new music work sandwiched, between the overture and the concerto in the first half, that gets played once and then hauled out 6 years later or 10 years later, isn't conducive in a mainstream orchestra to broadening your definition of music.
That's an interesting point, because the programs are all new music, even though they come from maybe different decades, but within the last 30 years, or mostly what we do has been written within the last 15 years. But even if we go back 20 years, 25 years, we're still in unfamiliar territory for most audiences. Never mind Ravel, or I heard that, the mainstream orchestras, Ravel is too far out.
That's hard.
But what I'm getting at is that that you're in the stream of music of our time.
Right.
You're not breaking out of that stream and jumping around. I don't mind that myself when I go to other concerts. But the point is, we are a very special orchestra that creates that setting in which these pieces relate to each other closer to being in our own time.
Right.
Kind of that gives it there's an integrity, there's a flow, there's a reason for those pieces being together. And in fact, I program concerts and seasons as though they are compositions. I mean, they don't take as much as actually writing a symphony.
Sure.
But the flow of a concert, the placement of pieces in relation to each other, and the thematic groupings of the season and the concerts. I actually spend that's where I spend a great deal of artistic time and thought and care to try and get that right, so that there is a sense that there's a cohesiveness.
Narrative to the season as a whole. If we look at this year as an example, it's interesting because it's not a formula, but it's a definite structure. You've got the four concerts, 4 works on each concert. In this season, two international, 2 Canadian. The first concert I don't think had a premiere work, but every other one has at least one world premiere work, usually by the Canadians, but not exclusively by the Canadians.
And the other thing is, reflected in that first concert we did, was the fact that we give works that we commission, or even just other works, repeat performances. If they can play Beethoven's Fifth how many times in the stream of traditional classical orchestras, and that's why people love it, know it. It's part of their, psyche and blood pulse and nervous systems. it's to try and give our audiences a chance for deeper understanding and deeper listening. And of course, it was possible when we were able to do more recordings with CBC, and when you could listen on the radio, and some people could even tape it and listen to a piece or a program again and get familiar with it. Can't do it now. So it makes it even more important to give those pieces second and third, fourth.
Second and third readings and fourth. So Paul Frainer's work was what, the second?
Yes,
time?
but there are other works that we've given 6, 9 performances, sometimes because of tours, but others, for example, Claude Vivier's Zipangu, I don't know how many times we've done it. We put that, it's one of our touchstone kind of pieces. It's not for the whole orchestra, but it's something that we did really well when we started the orchestra, and we know it has an impact. It's also important for the musicians to have the ability to play it again, because you get deeper and deeper into not the musical, spiritual, intellectual thing when you do it again, deeper understanding, and that's important too. The other thing is, even if recordings were available of these pieces, the motto of the Toronto Musicians Association is live music is best.
Right.
And we believe that. I believe it. It's like you have to be in the space, and it's just the resonance of the room and the space and the air, the acoustic, and especially when you have a place like Kerner Hall, that's the best. I mean, it's okay to listen at home too on stereo.
Are you thinking of taking advantage of the infrastructure for live streaming from Kerner? I've noticed that a few of the presenters this year are doing that. Mendelssohn did it with their Lord Nelson. Soundstreams did it with their Daniel Hope concert, and I believe that this is something...
there are expenses to that when you have a large body of musicians.
Yeah, sure, huge.
And we, because of the demise of recording and broadcasting on the CBC, we are having to look quite seriously at all of that. We've just had a major in-depth research study done by David Yeager to all of our recordings in the CBC archives. There's now a really complete catalog.
Wow.
And we're trying to determine how best to use it, and what the costs are for rights payments to musicians and composers. And we want to edit, because some things we want really the finest that we've done over the years. So there's a lot of time involved in doing that, finances, which medium,
right,
etc. And it's, the other thing is that to have the orchestra and to be able to pay certain people, namely musicians,
right,
means that, well, I've achieved that by keeping administration
rock bottom,
really small.
Yep.
So staffing to do the cataloging that could have been done over 32 years, like it's really my shelf, and that won't actually even be used because it's at the CBC. But the point is, my shelf.
You choose your priorities.
Sort of disorganized, not disorganized, but I haven't done it methodically.
You choose your priorities
as a professional kind of thing.
I mean,
so the priority has been to get the musicians on the stage 4 times and do those performances.
So you were talking about repeat performances. For a lot of the composers, when they hear it, it's the first time they're hearing it. So do they then go back and revise and edit? And
absolutely. And so So we often, in the repeat performance, give the revised version premiere as well. I mean, that happened with Chris Harmon's piece. Just that we
remind
just
me
did,
of the name?
Coyote Soul.
Oh yeah, Close to You anagram.
Yeah.
That was lovely. The pre-concert chats are lovely at Esprit because part of it is your life partner, Alexina, as a composer herself, brings a perspective to the dialogue and the questioning that is lovely for an audience, because it's that fly on the wall thing that you're overhearing a conversation that they would be having, and it's really fun from that perspective. So
she's good at drawing things out of
drawing things out, and at having questions that the paid announcer like me wouldn't have, right? Because there's a kind of interior
Well, she's
dialogue
connected,
to it, so it's
and
lovely.
a colleague, etc. The other thing is we pay a great deal of attention to educational matters.
Right.
The pre-concert talks being, a really great part of that.
Yeah.
The orchestra actually developed its first audiences, aside from advertising to get people into the hall. We had something known as coffee chats in large private homes, and we would invite people to come. Usually it was like 5 days on an evening, 5 days before a concert, and we'd have the guest composers or the soloists or musicians from the orchestra come and explain, well, for the composers, their inspiration and their challenge in writing and what they were expecting to hear if it was a premiere. And the soloists would demonstrate special things that people should listen for. Musicians in the orchestra would give a perspective on what it's like to play 4 or 5 pieces with great intensity and technical and rhythmic and coloristic challenges, the things that are expected in new music that aren't there in traditional music.
Right.
So then we have a program called Creative Sparks, which is a mentoring.
In the schools.
Yeah, it's a
I
mentoring
saw a video
program.
that you did on last year's up at Claude Watson and Earl Haig. It's a very interesting piece.
Yeah.
It's nice to look at.
So what we do with Creative Sparks is invite composers to work with student composers and performers over 15-week period, say, and they develop compositions either as individual composers or as a group. And then in the case last year, we blended student performers with Esprit players and created an orchestra that played the student works.
And then at Korean,
Korean
it was
Hall.
a great hall, by the way.
And then we also mixed into that program some other works that Esprit would normally play on its own series. And we did, for example, Charles Ives' The Unanswered Question. And it was thrilling because we opened the concert with that, and that just got everybody listening.
Yeah.
And this is the kind of thing that I mean by strategic programming, because one might think, oh, for a group of like 600 high school kids, you have to have big, brash, loud piece to get their attention. No. Charles Ives, very silent strings coming out of the mist and atmosphere. That just set them up perfectly. It's great.
Yeah, no, it's, so that leads to another question I wanted to ask you in a sort of indirect way. I remember a few years ago talking to Michael Colgrass, who you've worked with on these Creative Sparks things, and he was showing how even with student composers, if you use a kind of graphic notation, one can move very far into the compositional process without having your bimas in composition. That there, do you get all kinds of scores and notation thrown at you by composers, or like take Adam Shime in your concert that's coming up, or the other premiere in that one is an English.
No, Shime is on the
On the
November 23rd.
November 23rd.
Shime and Doug Schmidt.
And
both of those, I haven't.
You haven't seen the scores
I haven't
yet?
seen Adams yet.
Okay.
He's been traveling,
Okay.
and then he had a family emergency, so
Okay.
I'm waiting for that score.
Is
But
that
I have
likely to
seen
be
Doug's.
a traditional score?
Yeah,
or-
well, it will be, knowing his music, it'll be highly detailed, like very precisely notated.
Okay.
And if graphics are in there, they will only be incidental to try and give suggestion of some inflections or some textures or
Okay.
something. But for the most part, Adam's music, what we've played of his music, not only precisely notated, but like a high degree of detail. But I can't promise that because I
You haven't
I'll-
seen.
I'll
And the
see
other
them.
works on the program?
And the other work is Doug Schmidt's Just a Stranger Here Myself.
Okay.
And it reflects his travels and his spiritual, intellectual, social reflections on all the different places he's lived. And he's currently living in Germany.
Okay.
And it's interesting that there's some aspect of identity, Canadian identity in Germany. And then when he comes to Canada, he feels a different identity, having acclimatized himself to Germany.
So he's a
th-
stranger
that's the
wherever
ki-
he
yeah,
is at the moment. Yeah,
exactly.
kind of double alienation.
Yeah, but also Doug, it's very interesting because Doug has traveled around the globe as part of a tango group, because that one of the things he did. I mean, he composes tango and plays bandoneon, and so that was a kind of gig that he had going, as well as composing contemporary concert music. So it's a reflection of that too.
So let's follow that thread that you were saying about each concert kind of being composed. There's a kind of compositional aspect. So the title of the November concert is, I've got it written down, but
It's
in
Revealed Time.
your Revealed Time.
And so there's a work by Joji Uasa, Japanese composer, and
And the title of that?
Revealed Time.
So you're
Okay.
drawing the title of the concert sometimes from a work.
Yeah, but in this case, it's interesting because there's another piece on the program called The Shadows of Time
Okay.
by Henri Dutilleux, French composer. And so there's another aspect of time. The work deals with kind of how events or situations from the past provided continuity and unity and indelibility in this case, because the piece celebrates or commemorates the end of the Second World War. And then there's an episode. It's in 5 episodes, one of which involves 3 solo child singers coming to us from the Canadian Children's Opera Company.
Yeah.
And that very specifically relates to, well, the text is why us,
Right.
the innocents and innocent children of the world, and the piece is dedicated to children. So that's one aspect of time, the shadows of time, and
Revealed Time.
revealed
Okay,
time.
the bookends
And a
of
revealed
it.
time is more about the expression of time in musically sculpted space. So it's more abstract.
So-
So that's like, I thought of that. Like here's,
Yeah.
people are going to have to think about time,
Right.
because time is in both titles, the pieces are somehow about time, but quite differently. In fact, Dutilleux's piece has in places a clock in the orchestra.
So with the commissioned works, did you? Because Adams is a commission, right?
Yes, that's a little different because I give composers quite
A lot of
I mean, entirely
lot of time.
leeway. No, not so much time necessarily, but
okay.
leeway. My philosophy about it is that I want to give them the chance to stretch the best opportunity that they won't get other places.
Right. So, but would he would not have, you wouldn't have said to him, the theme of this concert is
No.
such and such. I want you to be aware of that. It's up to you to then decide this piece, the way it's shaping, falls
never
within
done that.
this. You know.
No, I've never done that.
Okay.
And so that leaves a kind of a risk in programming.
Right.
I mean, it's, for example, the first concert of the season, I knew all the pieces. They'd all been
Right.
played before. I knew what I was putting together.
Right.
That gives you an advantage in programming.
Sure.
But this other way, what I've done is built a very strong block that I know with the Dutilleux and the Iwasa.
Right.
And then the unknowns, it's not that they're unknown, I know the composers and their work. And in Doug Schmidt's piece, I see delivered what I know of Doug's work, what I expected,
Right.
so to speak. I mean, I didn't expect that piece, the details of it, but I know generally what these people might,
Do.
probably will do. So, but it still remains, until you get the pieces and rehearse them. So it's a little bit, it's not risky.
An adventure,
it's an adventure. And
Yeah.
in fact, that word really is key. What's exciting about the original intent of Esprit was to continuously have composers commissioned and have the excitement of world premieres, making history. We're making history, the first piece, and we'll see where the history goes, and where the piece ends up, but that's what's exciting.
Yeah. Another pattern or strand that I've noticed, and I'm wondering how it fits into the process, is that each of the three remaining concerts, there is a soloist. So there's Viola Tengli in the next one, and then Robert Aiken, and then Stephen Satorski.
Our concert master, Stephen, yeah.
And so I was wondering where in your creative process, in terms of putting together a season, are you saying like a year out or in advance, damn, this is somebody I want to work with, or is it something that arises out of the commissioning? How does that all fit together? I'm sure there isn't a formula, but just using this season as an example,
well, this
how does
will
that all
be,
fall into place?
We've worked with Tung previously, and she's so fantastic. There's no reason not to work with her again, particularly when you know that there's an incredible viola piece that is not going to be heard, that should be heard.
And which piece is
well,
that?
the Schnittke Viola Concerto, for example, which she played with us previously.
And in this concert,
the Yuasa, Revealed Time. And I mean, it's a piece that the traditional audiences in this country or anywhere are not going to hear, but it's superb. And I know how she's going to play. It's going to be fantastic. And there good vibes, good working vibes, good vibes between the soloist and orchestra. And also the audience, I know, likes, well, this is the third time she's with us. And I know from audience feedback they're happy
Yeah.
that she'll be back with us. Robert Aiken, we're performing a work of his that we commissioned. It's called Berceuse, and it's a work for flute and orchestra. It's a kind of concerto, and Robert is, one of the grand guys of new music in Canada, and it's a really excellent piece, and it's an example of our revisiting. And then with Steven Statarski, I mean, there's this wonderful man who's our concert master, and it's time to give him a little bit of a spotlight as a soloist. And also the work is a piece called The Last Paradise. That's the title of our last program, and it might one might think The Last Paradise can be found in the world of music. I mean, that's one way of thinking about it when I think about the title of the concert. The piece is actually a Chinese work, and it reflects the last paradise as being the countryside of China, and it has some elements of ethnic Chinese sound in there. So there are three different reasons. I will say that there are many other wonderful soloists that I love to engage with Esprit. It's difficult because I can't plan as far ahead as I'd like to because of scheduling situations. My musicians are also members of the Canadian Opera Company Orchestra, the National Ballet Orchestra. So I am not able to settle on my dates until kind of a certain time when, by which some other great musicians have already booked themselves for 2 or 3 years in advance. So that's a challenge I have. Scheduling is a challenge. I've got the fact that my players are busy, the best musicians with other activities in Toronto. So there's that schedule. There's the availability of the wonderful Kerner Hall that I have to put in there. And then all the other things like reading week and holidays. It's complex, but we do it.
Sounds like a great challenge. I was going to ask you about the color of the poppy on your lapel.
Oh, it's not
there.
a poppy, it's a snowflake.
I know it isn't. I'm just joking. We're doing this interview just a few days before Remembrance Day, so everybody else has got a poppy on their lapel. But this is quite an achievement.
It's a snowflake with a maple leaf centered.
It's an Order of Canada pin.
It's an Order of Canada pin. I was appointed to the order in June this year, and I'm very proud.
Yeah, you don't do it for the kudos, but it doesn't hurt when they happen. It's nice to be recognized.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sincerely. You know what? We haven't touched on everything, but if
That's
this is
great.
going to
I
be
feel-
manageable, this
Yeah.
is just a great little chance to talk, and I'm sure we'll do it again.
Good. Thank you.
Alex.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks very much.
Okay.
Goodbye. Thank you for being with us. Bye-bye.
Bye now.